The story everyone thinks they know about The Sound of Music feels almost too perfect to question. A cheerful governess, seven charming children, breathtaking mountains, and songs that seem to float through time itself. It's the kind of film that feels untouched by chaos, as if every frame was guided by pure magic. But behind that polished surface, there were moments strange, uncomfortable, and sometimes outright disastrous that the studio never intended anyone to hear about. These weren't just minor mishaps or harmless bloopers. Some of them were so disruptive, so embarrassing, or so risky that they were quietly buried, tucked away behind contracts, silence, and the carefully crafted illusion of perfection. During the filming in Austria, the cast and crew quickly realized that nature itself wasn't going to cooperate with their vision. The rolling hills and soft sunlight seen on screen came at a price. Sudden storms would appear without warning, drenching costumes and equipment within minutes. Entire days of shooting were lost to rain, but what made things worse was how unpredictable it all felt. One moment the skies were clear, the next they turned into a gray wall. Tempers began to rise, and the cheerful atmosphere the film demanded became harder to maintain. Some scenes had to be repeated over and over, not because of acting mistakes, but because the environment refused to stay consistent. There was one particular sequence that looked effortless in the final film, the joyful outdoor singing scenes with the children. On screen, everything feels light and carefree, but behind the camera, exhaustion was building. The children, many of whom had little experience with long filming schedules, were pushed to repeat the same movements and songs for hours. Smiles had to stay constant, energy had to remain high, and mistakes were not easily forgiven when expensive equipment and tight schedules were involved. Between takes, the mood often shifted dramatically. The laughter disappeared, replaced by fatigue and frustration that the audience would never suspect. Julie Andrews, who seemed endlessly graceful in every frame, faced her own hidden challenges. Her role required not just singing and acting, but maintaining a physical presence that matched the film's idealized tone. One of the most famous opening shots, where she spins in the meadow, looked like a simple, joyful moment. In reality, it was physically punishing. The camera's movement required multiple takes, and each time she had to repeat the same spin with perfect timing. The uneven ground made it difficult to keep balance, and the repeated motion left her dizzy. Still, she had to rise again and again, smiling as though nothing was wrong. What the audience never saw was how the crew struggled to keep control of the environment. Microphones would pick up unexpected sounds, wind tearing through the hills, distant animals, even echoes that distorted the music. These weren't small issues. They forced retakes, delayed schedules, and created tension between departments trying to fix problems that felt impossible to predict. Sound technicians worked tirelessly, often improvising solutions just to keep scenes usable. Yet none of that struggle made it into the final narrative. The film presents a seamless world, but the reality was far from it. There were also moments of tension between cast members that rarely get discussed. Long hours, demanding expectations, and constant repetition began to wear people down. Even small disagreements could grow into something larger when everyone was already stretched thin. Maintaining the illusion of a happy, united family on screen required effort that went beyond acting. It meant setting aside personal frustrations and stepping back into character, no matter what had just happened off camera. That emotional balancing act became one of the unspoken challenges of the production. One incident in particular left a lasting impression on those involved, though it was never meant to become public knowledge. During a scene that involved water, something went wrong with the timing and positioning of the actors. What was supposed to be a controlled, carefully rehearsed moment quickly turned into panic. A child actor found themselves struggling. And for a brief moment, the situation became genuinely dangerous. The crew reacted quickly, but the shock lingered long after filming resumed. Officially, it was treated as a minor issue. Unofficially, it became one of those stories people hesitated to bring up. Even the technical aspects of the film created unexpected complications. Lighting, which was essential for achieving the film's soft, glowing look, sometimes worked against the actors. The equipment used to simulate natural light was powerful and intrusive. It generated heat, noise, and an environment that made concentration difficult. Romantic scenes that appeared intimate and serene were often filmed under conditions that felt anything but. Maintaining emotional authenticity while surrounded by glaring lights and constant adjustments required a level of focus that wasn't always easy to sustain. Christopher Plummer, who played Captain Von Trapp, had a particularly complicated relationship with the film. While audiences saw a composed and emotionally evolving character, behind the scenes he struggled to connect with the material. The tone of the film, which leaned heavily into sentimentality, didn't align with the kind of work he preferred. This disconnect created an internal conflict that influenced his experience throughout filming. He remained professional, delivering the performance required, but the gap between his personal feelings and the film's message was something he couldn't fully ignore. At times, that tension surfaced in subtle ways. Scenes that required deep emotional expression were not always as straightforward as they appeared. There were moments when the performance had to be carefully shaped, adjusted, and sometimes even reconstructed to achieve the desired effect. The audience sees a seamless emotional journey, but behind it was a process that involved trial, error, and compromise. It's one of those hidden layers that rarely gets acknowledged, but plays a crucial role in shaping what ultimately appears on screen. The children, who became one of the film's most beloved elements, experienced their own set of challenges. While their performances feel natural and spontaneous, they were carefully guided through each scene. Direction had to balance discipline with encouragement, ensuring that the performances remained authentic without becoming mechanical. This was especially difficult during longer shooting days, when energy levels dropped and concentration became harder to maintain. Yet somehow, the final result feels effortless, as though everything unfolded naturally. There were also creative decisions that changed dramatically during production. Certain scenes didn't work as originally planned and had to be reimagined on the spot. These changes weren't always easy. They required quick thinking, flexibility, and sometimes the willingness to abandon ideas that had seemed perfect on paper. In some cases, these adjustments led to improvements. In others, they were simply necessary to keep the production moving forward. Either way, they became part of the hidden history of the film. What makes these stories particularly intriguing is how carefully they were kept out of the public narrative. Studios at the time were deeply invested in maintaining a certain image. Films like The Sound of Music weren't just entertainment. They were cultural events. Admitting to chaos, conflict, or accidents risked breaking the illusion that made them so appealing. So the stories stayed behind the scenes, shared quietly among those who were there, but rarely spoken about openly. Over time, bits and pieces began to surface. Interviews, memoirs, and casual remarks revealed glimpses of what had really happened. These weren't dramatic confessions or shocking exposés. They were often small, almost offhand comments that hinted at a much more complex reality. Each one added another layer to the story, showing that the film's creation was far from the smooth, harmonious process it appeared to be. What's fascinating is that none of these hidden moments diminish the film's impact. If anything, they make it more remarkable. Knowing that something so polished came from such an unpredictable and sometimes chaotic process adds a new dimension to its success. It becomes a testament not just to talent, but to persistence, adaptability, and the ability to keep moving forward even when things don't go as planned. There's also something deeply human about these stories. They remind us that behind every perfect scene are real people dealing with real challenges. The laughter, the frustration, the exhaustion, all of it becomes part of the final product, even if it's not visible. It's a reminder that art often emerges from imperfection, shaped by circumstances that are anything but ideal. As the years passed, the film continued to grow in popularity, becoming a timeless classic that generations would return to again and again. Most viewers never questioned how it was made. They simply enjoyed the music, the story, and the sense of warmth it created. But for those who look a little deeper, the hidden stories offer a different perspective, one that doesn't replace the magic but complements it. In the end, the so-called forbidden scenes aren't scenes in the traditional sense. They're moments that existed just outside the frame, shaping the film in ways the audience could never see. They're the laughter that interrupted serious takes, the accidents that nearly derailed production, the disagreements that had to be set aside, and the constant effort to turn something unpredictable into something unforgettable. And maybe that's what makes the story behind The Sound of Music so compelling. It's not just about what was shown, but about what was hidden. Not just about the harmony on screen, but about the chaos that made it possible. Because sometimes the most interesting part of a story isn't the one everyone knows. It's the one no one was supposed to talk about.